Hey you guys, welcome back to Flickers of Fear. It's my little movie review series that I do on the side. So whenever I hear about a movie that kind of had a big amount of hype sort of building up around it, usually after it debuted at a film festival of some kind, I usually try to sort of push the film up in the rotation so I can kind of see what the fuss was all about. So when I heard about the movie A Wounded Fawn, and I heard that it was kind of one of the ones that was the most talked about movies at the Tribeca Festival in 2022, like late 2022, I think that was. Also has a 96% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and also got nominated for a Fangoria Chainsaw Award under the Best Streaming Premiere Movie category. It's actually streaming on Shudder at the moment. I think it's also on Amazon Prime, but if you have Shudder, you can watch it as well. That's where I watched it. So because of all that stuff, I was like, okay, well, I know I got to see this, especially after I read that it was kind of like a surrealistic throwback to maybe like the Grindhouse movies of the 1970s, but also kind of intermingled with sort of like an art house flair, which is, you know, that's a combination that's really going to pique my interest. You know what I mean? That sounds like it's like right up my alley. I was also really interested to see it because it was written and directed by Travis Stevens, who was also the guy behind two other movies that I really liked, Girl on the Third Floor from 2019 and Jacob's Wife with Barbara Crampton from 2021. Now, I think we've covered both of those over on our matinee show, if I'm not mistaken. So we've seen both of these guys, this guy's movies. But yeah, so this guy has like kind of an aesthetic and a style that I really dig, so I was like really excited to see this one. So A Wounded Fawn is set in the present day, but it was shot on actual film, and you can see it, like it's the grain and everything like that. It looks great. And also he made the interesting choice to use that real bright red, like tempera paint looking blood that they used a lot, like in like Giallo movies from the 60s and 70s. So, you know, that was a very deliberate stylistic choice, which I really liked. So the movie kind of gives this really cool, like sinister retro kind of vibe, even though, like I said, it's set in the present day. And I like that it seems really authentic. It's not at all, because I know that there's, you know, there's a big thing, particularly in horror, for the last 10 to 20 years, something like that, where it's like everybody wants to, you know, stuff to look like it was set in the 70s or the 80s or whatever. And this really seems like genuine rather than just trying to copy a style. You know what I'm saying? So at the beginning of the movie, we're in this auction house thing, and there's kind of like a heated bidding war, which ensues over this little like Hellenistic era sculpture called the Wrath of the, I think it's Arenes is I think how you pronounce it. I looked it up and I was just kind of like, oh, it's close enough. Which is kind of like the Furies, we would call them the Furies of Greek mythology. And there's three of them, and they're kind of getting ready to lay down some mythological whoop ass on this like cowering man who's like, oh shit, oh no. So the three figures in this sculpture, who are named Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone, I think. These are these kind of like, you know, vengeful deities, I guess. I mean, their sole purpose in mythology is to take revenge on villainous men, pretty much. So this sculpture kind of, it's not only an important plot point as the story goes on, but it's also kind of like a thematic touchstone, like to the kind of themes that the movie is exploring as well. So the sculpture is ultimately won by this woman named Kate, who buys it for $150,000 for her client. So she takes it home, and she has this really like nice, swanky, very ultra modern house with all this art in it, but not too long after she gets there with the little statue in a crate and everything, and she kind of like changes into something more comfortable and pours herself a glass of champagne, and she's chilling out with music or whatever, her doorbell rings, and you can tell that she's not really expecting anybody. So she's like, huh, what's going on? So she answers the door like very warily, and she sees one of her fellow auction attendees, whose name is Bruce, who's actually played by Josh Rubin. I actually recognized him from Scare Me. I think he wrote and directed that as well as starred in it. So that's because I was like, oh, that's the dude from Scare Me, which is also like a pretty decent movie. I think I reviewed that a while back too. So Bruce is standing outside, like on the sidewalk outside her house. Now he seems very nice, and he just apologizes for this intrusion and stays like a very respectful distance away from the front door, so he's not like, fogging up on her or anything. Now, Bruce explains to her, he's like, look, my own client absolutely has to have this sculpture and is willing to offer twice what you paid for it, plus an additional $25,000 finder's fee, like for you, for Kate. So after a little bit of this kind of negotiation and back and forth, she's like, oh, well, I want a little bit more money too. And he's just like, okay, they would probably do that. So Kate decides, okay, well, I'm gonna let the man inside while she calls her client to sort out like all the deals, the details of like this proposed deal. Unfortunately for Kate, though, Bruce is not who he appears to be, which starts to become very clear as he hallucinates like this kind of lurid red light sort of appearing in Kate's hallway or bathroom or something like that. He looks down there and sees it. And then he sees this kind of man-sized owl creature, like a thing with an owl head. So, which is a very, very striking visual. Now, we learn as the story goes on, this is, I guess, like a representation of like the evil that lurks inside Bruce, like sort of, you know what I mean? I don't want to super spoil it, but yeah, that's kind of what it represents. Now, shortly after this event, which ends badly, I shouldn't have to tell you, we switch gears a bit, and then we start to follow this woman named Meredith. And she works at a museum. She's like a docent or something like that. And she has recently kind of freed herself from a 3-year abusive relationship. So she's talking to her 2 friends who also work at the museum. And through this discussion, we learn that Meredith has just met a new guy who she thinks might be kind of like a serious prospect. They've been on a couple of dates, apparently, and this weekend he's invited her to spend a couple of days like out at this cabin that he owns in the woods, with the implication that this will be like the first time that they're going to have sex, right? So Meredith's girlfriends are very excited for her because they know that it's hard for her to, kind of get back out there after the shitty relationship she was in for so long. And Meredith herself seems really hopeful about this. I mean, she's in a good place emotionally. She's been going to therapy, like to deal with stuff, and she seems to have, really benefited from that. However, when this new mystery man that she's been talking about comes to pick Meredith up for the trip, it turns out to be Bruce, who the audience already knows is a very, very, very bad person. Now, on the drive to the cabin, Bruce seems pretty friendly and like normal enough, right? But he has like a few little behavioral quirks, I guess, that kind of put Meredith on her guard, right? Like one of the things is she asks, there's like this roadside little attraction or stand or something like that, and she's like, oh, can we stop there and buy some candy, and there's a bathroom and I have to use the bathroom. And he pretty much refuses to do that. Oh, we're so close, can't you hold it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not overtly shitty about it, but it's pretty obvious that he wants to remain in control of the situation, which, is making Meredith a little bit apprehensive. It's a little bit of a red flag when you ask something reasonable like that and the dude won't do it. You know what I mean? So when they get to the house, Meredith is a little bit freaked out by how isolated it is. Although when she goes inside, she's like, oh my God, it's beautiful in there. It's really cozy. It's very tastefully decorated. It's got like all this beautiful art in it. Now, of particular interest in regards to art is the statue on the coffee table, which of course is the statue we saw earlier at the auction house, the Wrath of the Arenes. So Meredith remembers this piece quite well, as it happens, because it came through her museum to establish provenance, like a little while before it was sold at auction. And she's actually surprised that Bruce has it because she's like, I know how much it sold for. And I guess she was kind of like surprised that he could afford to just drop 150 grand on this little thing. And he's just like, oh, it's not the real one. It's just like a really good reproduction. But given her expertise in this area, she doesn't quite buy that. So that kind of raises her suspicions a little bit further. Now, as the evening goes on, Bruce kind of seemingly plays the perfect host. He makes a really nice dinner and all this other stuff. But Meredith is just starting to feel like really, really on edge, as is the audience, because we know like what he's up to. Like, she doesn't know. Now, when she, like, even before she goes in the house, like when she's getting her shit out of the trunk of the car or whatever, she hears like what sounds like a phantom woman's voice, like going, leave. And she's like, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean? And then she starts seeing like flashes or like visions. She sees like what appears to be a woman like outside the windows, like out in the dark woods and shit like that. And she keeps telling him, she's like, bro, there's like somebody outside your house, like your motion lights came on. And he's like, I don't have any motion lights. And she's like, well, something came on out there. It's like there's something out there. So as this continues, like she maybe thinks it's like paranormal or some shit like that because, you know, he doesn't see anything. So his temper like starts, you know, getting hotter and hotter, and Meredith starts getting more and more nervous, and he basically tells her straight up, well, you're just imagining all of this, you know what I mean? It's just like your standard a haunting kind of thing where it's just like, you stupid woman, you can't like trust the fucking, you know, the evidence of your senses, and it's like you're just imagining it and there's nothing out there. So finally, the combination of all of this apparently ramping up supernatural activity, and Bruce getting more and more douchebaggy, that kind of culminates in Meredith being like, dude, I don't feel comfortable like staying here with you, like out here in the middle of nowhere. Drive me back home or I'm gonna like call a ride share, you know, and that's just the end of it. So he's pretty furious about this, but he does actually calmly agree to take her back to the city. However, while she's packing up her stuff, she gets a call from one of her girlfriends. See, this friend, like I said, they both worked at the museum too. Because she was suspicious about him having the sculpture, she sent a picture of it to one of her friends and said, hey, remember when this came through the museum? Like, it's right here. And the friend says, not only was that sculpture stolen, but the woman who bought it at the auction has been missing since the night of the auction. So now Meredith is really, really sure that she's in terrible, terrible danger. So she tries to kind of placate Bruce, like tries to put a neutral face on so he won't know like what she's found out, but he's not stupid and he's kind of able to get the jump on her. Now, up to this stage in the movie, the story is played out pretty much like a standard thriller with like a few kind of surrealistic or possibly paranormal flourishes like thrown in there, right? But after this point, it goes off in kind of a lot wilder, like more nightmarish kind of direction that I don't really want to spoil. Because the way that the narrative unfolded from this point was pretty unexpected and ended up like producing some really awesome like imagery. There's a lot of gore in this too. It's not like over the top gory, and like some of it is kind of like hyper real or surrealistic and stuff like that. So it's not like a bloodbath or nothing, but there's a lot of really beautiful, bizarre imagery in this. Like I said, it's kind of like surreal, and from this point onward, that's kind of where it starts going more into that territory. So I'm gonna say like a lot of these kinds of art house horror films, A Wounded Fawn is not going to be for everybody. And it seemed like I read some of the Shudder reviews and they were pretty much loved it. Like it was 5-star or 1-star, like what the fuck did I just watch kind of thing. So it's one of those kind of movies. I feel like I don't know if I'd say it's like super divisive, but it's a little bit divisive, you know what I mean? I kind of feel like some people might think that it's like too out there or maybe too pretentious or too baffling or whatever to really enjoy fully. Because I will say that its third act is kind of bonkers and really only makes sense within like a Greek mythology kind of framework. Because remember I said that statue was like a thematic touchstone, and that's what I was talking about. So if you're not really down with kind of bizarre imagery that isn't overtly explained and like symbolism that's based around art history or mythology, then you might have a bad time and you might not know what's going on. But I have to say that movies like this, like I said, are right up my alley. So I really, really dug it. I really liked the audacity of the thing. Like the way that it took this kind of straightforward cat and mouse premise, you know, oh, I start dating a new guy and it turns out he's like he's crazy or he's like a murderer or whatever, which is a very common like thriller trope. And so it just took that and then it just kind of piles layers and layers of these just operatic visuals and all kind of like allegorical fantasias and stuff like that, like on top of this very simple, straightforward narrative. So, I mean, at its heart, the movie is like a pretty much a simple revenge story, like kind of like a supernatural kind of revenge story. But the style here is really what elevates it, at least in my opinion. And I mean, I think the look of the movie is one of the very best things about it. Performances also are amazing, particularly the two main leads. I mean, the interactions between the two of them, and it's really suspenseful because, like I said, you know that this is a bad guy, but she doesn't necessarily know that. So the fact that, like, watching her kind of like realize, like, by incremental, stages, like how much trouble she's in is like really suspenseful, and I thought it was really well done. So I'm gonna say, like, if you like your horror kind of like arty and ballsy and aren't afraid to kind of embrace the mythic and surrealistic aspects of it, then you might really dig it. I really dug it, and some other people did too that I saw. Like I said, some people really hated it, so I don't know how you're gonna fall on that. But if it sounds like something that you would enjoy, please head over to Shudder, or like I said, I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon Prime too, and check it out if it sounds like something that you would be into. So that will do it for this Flickers of Here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please remember, like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that kind of good stuff, and I will see you again on the next one. Bye.